Hey guys, how's it going today? Thanks for joining me on this live stream here today, where we're going to talk about paranormal phenomena uh, and the elephant in the room and silence, and why we don't often talk about some of these topics. I want to kind of give you another angle on this that's not technical here. It more has to do with something that those of us involved with social sciences and sociology know about, of why you get these structures within our societies that act like these dams against information coming out. So I just want to show you another perspective on this that doesn't actually have to do with showing you the piece of an extraterrestrial craft or direct evidence, which we hear about all the time, but kind of like the structure of our minds and our society that keeps information from coming out. So it's great to have you here today. How's the sound there coming through? I thought it'd be fun to do this today because right before the holiday season starts, Thanksgiving, before people are on the move, I know people are starting to travel soon, so I just thought it'd be fun to get together. And I want to take your questions at the end. Um, uh, Anything that's on your mind or so forth. Um, so, before we begin, let's see, sounding okay as we got some volume there. It's looking good on my end here. So, we've got this movie coming out. We've got this movie coming out tomorrow, which about the Age of Disclosure, right? This movie by Dan Farah that people saw at the South by Southwest Festival. And I'm reading a lot of commentary about this. Yes, it actually doesn't show us technically new information, but we have a lot of credible people in this film, from what I can see, who are telling us what they've seen and what they believe is going on with the phenomena. And I think that's a very important step, as we're just about to talk about. It's not just, here's the main point for this talk today, this live stream. It's not just the evidence that matters. It's the willingness to look at evidence, right? So it's not just seeing an actual photo of a craft on the ground or something like that. It's alien bodies or things like that. And look, I've talked to people that have seen these things. You haven't heard from them yet. They haven't come forward. But I've talked to people who've seen all of this many times over, these crash recoveries, things that are underground at Air Force bases and things like this. And we haven't heard from these people yet. And this is why I know that whatever you want to call it, disclosure, whatever it is, with a little d, with a big D, it's going to be a big event, because I know how many people you haven't heard from yet. Okay, I know that side of it because I've heard these things from these people, and they haven't really wanted to come forward to allow me to tell you what they've seen. And I've made some videos about it in the past, as you know, where I've kind of mentioned some of these people without being too specific. But believe me, these are people that are, some of them are very well known in their industries. And if they came forward to tell all of you what they told me, we would start seeing some action on this topic. But here's the thing about it. There has to be a willingness to listen to this information. And that has to do with our psychology and our social structures and so forth. So we'll talk about that in a second. Now, before we get to that, about what's happening on the road to disclosure, about all these topics that we talk about on this topic, that on this channel, that I know you guys are interested in. Just a couple notes. Opening Minds, my first book, way back in 2002. I still think it's highly accurate about remote viewing, my experience with resonance and crop circles and so forth. I'm releasing the audiobook version of this because when I first recorded the audio version of this book back in around 2002, and we're talking, like 23 years ago, it's a big chunk of time. There were no downloadable audiobooks online. Everything you'd make a CD and you'd mail it to people and so forth. And that's what I did with this. And there were a lot of different reviews of it. Some people liked the sound of my voice reading it. Some people didn't. Whatever. You guys have all listened to audiobooks. Sometimes the narrator's voice appeals to you. Sometimes it doesn't. Whatever. But now we have these downloadable, books right from Amazon and other places, Audible and so forth. So I'm creating an Audible version of this, which has been submitted to them. They're reviewing it right now, and hopefully it'll be for sale now. So like a lot of you requested, you prefer the audio versions of books. I listen to a lot of audiobooks too. So just want you to know that the audio version of this should be available soon if the gatekeepers at Audible find the topics here acceptable for all of you to listen to. And secondly, my more recent book, Dark Matter Monsters, I'm doing a Kindle countdown on this. So if you don't have a copy of it, it starts at like 99 cents. So you don't have any reason not to get it. This Saturday, the Kindle countdown is starting for a week. I see it's a little blurry here because of this effect. Maybe that's a little better. Right. So this book, which I'm very gratified, has really been very exciting to people and has, created, a lot of conversation about this topic. I'm still doing a lot of interviews about this topic. A recent one was the one I did with Jeremiah over, was it Bigfoot Stories? I forgot I posted it on my blog and the Patreon. That was a very good interview because we got into the physics of it. So Dark Matter Monsters will be available if you know anyone who wants to read it for a very low cost during this Kindle countdown, which lasts a week, where they, it starts really low priced and it just slowly goes back to the ordinary price of, I think, $7.95, whatever it is. So if you want to read it, now is your chance. So anyway, hey there, let's just say who is with us today. We got Luscious Jules. We got the Corkster from the East Coast. Hey, Corkster, how's it going? Rodzor. And I saw, we got Matt here. Hello, Matt. Michael, how are you doing? Thanks for being here. So, before we get into this discussion of silence and denial and why it seems so hard to make progress in these topics, believe me, guys, I've been involved with this area now for almost 3 decades. It'll be 3 decades in 1996. And 1996 is not very far away from us right now, is it? So this is how long I have been involved, starting with RV, proceeding to crop circles, and excuse me a sec, that should be silenced. And going to the topics of linear cold fusion, now more recently called coherent energy transformations, and all these related topics, UFOs, cryptids, Bigfoot, and so forth. I have seen everything in 30 years, guys. It's been just amazing to watch the reaction to it. And I think there's some fundamental underlying principles behind all these topics. And that is, if you've been following my channel here at all, and, during our conversations and things when we've talked, I think there are a few fundamental principles at work in everything that we call paranormal, supernatural, and so forth. Because when you look at what the witnesses say, you get a lot of the same phenomena every time, or many times, no matter what type of paranormal, supernatural phenomena. And this extends to what we call fringe science. Now, this wasn't something I was looking for. It's just being involved for, like a third of a century in these topics and looking at what the witnesses say they've seen. And I got to tell you one thing about teaching RV classes, and for most of my life recently, um, these were live classes. Like Jules, who's our moderator today in the chat, took my live class in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I have done these classes in different places over the years. Kind of COVID was kind of a dividing line there where I started to do them on Zoom. But I did them all over the place, and I had them for years and years and years right here in Boulder, Colorado, over on the pedestrian mall on Pearl Street. And one of the advantages, folks, of dealing and teaching RV and being involved with RV is hearing hundreds and hundreds of people's stories about their experiences, doing what's happened to them in life. How did they get interested in RV? And so many people had some other experience, okay? It just wasn't this out of the blue curiosity in RV from listening to Art Bell and Coast to Coast. They had some experience. I remember one case of this woman from Estes Park that took the class once, and we were doing something like a round building. I think it was the building from the movie Sleeper, that Woody Allen movie. It was that building off I-70 up in the foothills as you go out of the Denver area into I-70, up that area above Golden and so forth. So she had this reaction to this target, and she hadn't seen the feedback yet, folks. She had just, we're doing the target, and she's getting this reaction. She says, I don't like this target, blah. I'm feeling uncomfortable with it. It was just a picture of a round modern building, but it triggered a memory in her mind of something she had forgotten, of round spacecraft in her mind visiting her house growing up in Estes Park, hovering over the house when she was a kid, hovering there over the roof. It was a repressed memory, right? And so she does the target, then we talk about her experience, with as what was hovering over her house as a kid. She said like things were like coming out of it, like tentacles or something, whatever. I wasn't there, but here's the thing. A couple weeks later, she wrote to me and said that this would have been around 97, that she was up in Estes Park again, and she was at an intersection, and she saw a green floating object the size of a VW bug hovering 1 block away off the ground. She timed it. It lasted 30 seconds. This green hovering object, and it shot off. Right? What do you call that? We call UAP, UFO, whatever. So what she felt was that doing that session on the Woody Allen Sleeper house somehow opened up a space in her mind to receive that information again from her own past experience. And she said she thought doing that target allowed her to have this experience with the UFO, UAP, orb, whatever it was, a couple weeks later in Estes Park. So this is how I think about disclosure, is that it's not just officials telling us what they know, like we'll see in this movie Age of Disclosure. And I haven't seen it yet, but I encourage you all to watch it on all the streaming channels this weekend, and just make some comments about it on Rotten Tomatoes or wherever you can leave a review. But it's not just people like that who we see as authority figures, people who've been high up in the Pentagon or intelligence agencies or military. It's not just that. There's something in our minds that have to allow us to recognize that we had the experience, that it's real, that it's safe to talk about. So that's my perspective on it, beyond the technical side, which is also very important. I've learned a lot about the technical side of this recently from listening to Bob Greenyer on the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project channel. I started listening to Bob about 4 or 5 years ago. He came up on the ECAT site, ECAT World, about Andrea Rossi's, potentially operational LENR, low energy nuclear reaction device, so what we used to call cold fusion. And Bob had posted a comment. I looked at his videos, and it started to answer a lot of questions for me about what I had seen around crop circles with all our devices going on the fritz, weird space-time anomalies and so forth. There was something about vortex energy that had an impact on the surrounding area. And I've been listening to Bob for a long time. I learned a ton. I encourage you to listen to his channel too, because I've learned a lot about the technical side of cold fusion LENR and all the other topics that it relates to. So the technical side is very important. And if we can create a free energy device at some point, which, I'm sure is coming down the road, some cleaner way to generate energy, kind of cleaner technologies, that would be great. The other side of it is the elephant in the room argument. Now, I have to tell you what I think has a lot to do with this. And luckily, there's a new book about it by Gerald Pollack, who I got to hear at the SSE meetings in Washington, D.C. a number of years ago in 2015. And he was talking about the fourth phase of water. His new book is called Charge: The Unexpected Role of Electricity in the Workings of Nature. And it's a perfect follow-up to his book about the fourth state of water, because what you get from listening to Gerald Pollack, who's, I believe he's a full professor at University of Washington in Seattle, is, guys, you think there's resistance to some of the topics we're interested here in? Bigfoot, UFOs, psychokinesis, any of these so-called fringe science topics. What Pollack told us in his first book, the fourth phase of water, it's a phase of water between solid and liquid, which explains why water has so many interesting properties to it. There's resistance to look at the basic fundamental aspects of reality that we're all familiar with, including water. Pollack tells us that he was told by his department chair at the UW, I believe it's materials physics or biophysics, something like this, that it could adversely affect his career to look at the fourth phase of water. He had invited someone to speak at the university there about these self-organizing forms of water that create vortex cooling and all sorts of interesting features of water that allow us to be alive and allow clouds to stay in the sky. So that just ordinary questions about dogma can have adverse effects, and he was warned to stay away from the topic, which luckily for us, he didn't. Well, his new book goes back into this same subject area, and it's good old Gerald Pollack telling us again how little we know about electricity and electrostatic charges, what we call static electricity, which no one really knows what it is. There is no really static electricity. Pollack tells us that it's basically all charges and charge imbalances. When there's an imbalance, there's a flow, and so forth. And again, he opens up the book, and I believe, by the way, if you want to check this out, when I looked at Amazon, there was a coupon there yesterday. You can get it for less than I bought it for a week ago. So I've just started reading it. But I mean, it goes into a lot of questions which we're not encouraged to ask because our school systems don't encourage this. Is why do clouds stay in the sky? Water is really heavy, and a typical cumulus cloud weighs something like 100 tons, right? And normally, if you're carrying water, it's pretty heavy. Why are the clouds even up there if they're filled with water droplets, which collectively are very heavy? Electrostatic charges, repulsion from the Earth, positive, negatively charged Earth. He gets into a very interesting subject here: why spiders can fly. There have been experiments done on spiders, which show that they can fly in the absence of wind. Spiders can go between continents, and they're not just flying on the wind streams up there, right? They're not just going along on the upper atmospheric currents. Even in the absence of wind, they can fly. And that's why when you're walking around the woods or even your house, you see a web between this wall and this wall. It's like, how did they do that? Because they're flying. They're flying with electrostatic charge. And other examples in here about why the planets keep spinning, why our atmosphere doesn't just blow away, right? It's pretty thin. Looking at the size of the Earth, very thin little layer of gaseous atmosphere that allows us to stay alive and so forth. So also his son illustrated this book, which is really interesting. So I'm just telling you about this because after looking at all of these topics for all of these years, what I think most of what we call supernatural, paranormal, fringe science comes down to is electrical charge and the incredible strength of charges at small scales. And again, this is something I learned from listening to the MFMP channel and reading a lot of the works that were on reference there. But there are these very strong attractive forces between electric charges at small scales. What you and I learned in school, right? What did we learn in school, guys? Like forces repel, right? Put two negative charges together, they repel. Positive charges repel. Well, according to Kenneth Shoulders, who we talked about, I talked about with Science Bob on Spaced Out Radio, I believe it was a week ago. A little over a week ago on Spaced Out Radio. You can go listen to it again. The person who invented microelectronic masking techniques for the government for microelectronic circuits that's now in all of our electronics and so forth, discovered micro ball lightning, exotic vacuum objects, EVs, as he called them, initially to verify the discoveries of Canadian inventor John Hutchison, who was able to create these fractured metal samples, which I actually was lucky enough to handle because Bob Greenyer brought some of these to the Cosmic Summit. I believe it was 2 years ago in Charlotte, North Carolina. I got to handle, those fractured metal samples. And what's so amazing about these fractured pieces of metal with other pieces of metal embedded in them like coins is it's done at room temperature. They look like they've been melted, but it's been done purely with electromagnetism. And of course, Hutchinson, if I understand it correctly, was attempting to duplicate Nikola Tesla's pulsed disruptive discharge systems, which Tesla did with these huge coils and so forth. What Shoulders was able to do was to verify some of Hutchinson's results, not exactly the way he produced it, but ended up the same results using this micro ball lightning, the same little witness marks we see on metal plates and so forth. The same thing that Takaaki Matsumoto found, Satomova and other researchers. I'm just saying this, that there are people that have actually made the same argument. Shoulders, C.P. Kouropoulos, who I've referenced before, and Pollack is making the same argument. And I'm not going to talk too much about this right now. I mean, we could save it for another conversation. But basically, you start reading this book, what does Pollack tell us? That electrostatic charge is 10 to the 38th times stronger than gravity, okay? It is what creates the strong and weak nuclear forces. And you could make the argument that the only force that ultimately exists in the universe is electrical charge and the way it interacts. Now, why haven't we understood this so far? Because we're basically tuned off into our mesoscale reality where we're looking just at things you see. But at the fractal level, as you get smaller and smaller, these charges begin to multiply in effect. And you don't need a lot of charge imbalance to create a big effect. And that ultimately, this is why I wanted to talk about it. That's what Pollack is arguing about in Charged, is that small charge imbalances can create a big effect. It's like when you walk across a carpet or you touch, your pet or something like that over there, like that one on my couch here. can be up to like 10,000 volts. It's a lot of voltage. It's very small amperage, so it's not going to hurt you, but it's a lot of charge. And slight imbalances can create these big changes. I was going through my files, that like I cut out articles over the years, like you guys sometimes do. Sometimes I cut out articles that I don't understand completely at the time, thinking they'll make sense later. I came across one where someone had created a fire on a rug just walking across the rug from electrostatic charges. The room had caught on fire from electrostatic charges. So that's how strong they can be. And 10 to the 38th times gravity, that's really huge. And so what I think is going on, folks, and we can get back to this in a moment in Q&A, is that a lot of what we call paranormal, supernatural, are these fractal, toroidally shaped charges and charge clusters at the very small scale, as Kuropoulos and Shoulders tell us. When the electrons are very close together, they can create a lot of attractive force, which creates other states of matter. And that's what Pollack argues in the fourth state of water, that water can be self-organizing and carry charge and create a lot of phenomena, like the reason that hot water freezes faster than cold water. It creates structures in there because of these charges, what he calls easy water, these zones of electrical charge in water. This isn't something we can see with our eyes because it's happening at it's not literally subatomic, but it's a very tiny scale, right? And it ends up creating ball lightning and micro ball lightning. Okay, Quarks, we're going to get to that in a second. Yeah, I'll tell you my most memorable experience because I have something to add about that. So thanks for bringing that up. Of course, we will get to that in a second. Yeah, well, we're going to talk about PK. That was part of my plan today. We'll talk about this in a moment. But I think, folks, and my background as a sociologist. I'm not trained technically as a physicist. All this that I know about this is self-learned. It's from listening to the MFMP channel and reading a lot and so forth. Is we haven't, as Pollack says here, we don't understand nature at all. We keep trying to look at these other forces to explain what we see, like this flying spiders and birds that stay aloft with no wind. Electrostatic charge. It's the same thing that we've been told is applied to our advanced, black budget aircraft, static charges on the wings to keep them aloft to maybe gain a little more lift and velocity. This is something, anything that we're going to find in our technology, as Ray Bradbury once said at a lecture I saw him give at the University of Arizona, everything that we find in technology already exists in nature. It's something I never forgot, that Ray Bradbury. Luckily, I got to see him way back in the 80s when I was doing my master's degree at the U of A in Tucson. Everything from technology, if you think about it, is an extension of our bodies and of nature and so forth. So anything we find in technology already exists in nature, and that's what Pollack is telling us in his book Charged, again, is that we need to look how nature does it. And it seems to be, because we're not all that familiar with fractal geometry, fractal toroidal shapes, and so forth, it's that these various types of electric and electronic configurations can create other types of self-organizing structures, including, which Shoulders tells us, is other types of life. Yes. And in this, on my channel here a couple weeks ago, I made a video about Ken Shoulders' idea about electronic life forms and so forth, and types of life that, you won't see them. They're decoupled from our ordinary space-time constants, our reality. So they decouple from what we see around us, so they can be in the room around you. These life forms can be next to you, and you may only sort of feel them. You won't see them. You won't physically detect them. They have a different permittivity and permeability. So Shoulders kind of gives us evidence for it from that point of view. But I think we're all saying the same type of thing here, is there are different microelectronic structures with different geometries, fractal geometries, vortex geometries that can create alternative life forms. Or you can have creatures like Bigfoot, like I believe, this is my view, that they're able to use that type of electrostatic charge and really build it up to do things that to us seem supernatural and incredibly powerful. The ability to glide and slide over the ground, to look blurry, something that Jules and I always joke about. But I mean, it's serious. It's been seen in so many different type of phenomena. You look in the cold fusion Leonard experiments, Shakhparinoff with the Shakhparinoff generator, where he was able to generate, you read, we can't generate ball lightning in the lab. Wrong. I mean, Shakhparinoff was able to do that, including black ball lightning. Hutchinson, Matsumoto, and others are able to generate this. And others using cavitation and so forth are able to generate these micro ball lightnings. But what Shakhparinoff told us, it's like, I got to stop when I read this. He said, not only did it look bluish, these blue mists were coming from the generator, that it looked blurry. They couldn't take photos of it without the photos being blurry. I mean, this all comes down to the same type of physics. Now, what Pollack calls this type of phenomenon, again, is a type of vortex cooling. It's a phenomena that people report around haunted sites, ghosts, cryptids, UFOs. I've talked to witnesses that have reported the same thing about the whole environment cooling down. I mean, it's not Pollack is literally saying this, but my extension of reading Pollack is anything that has a vortex structure as the basis of its physiology is going to create cooling in the environment. I'm just suggesting that's what people are seeing around a lot of this phenomena. It may be happening at a micro fractal level. A fractal meaning just being self-similar, and it's just getting smaller, but it looks the same at different scales. And I think that this is a big part of it. Yeah. So Jules is mentioning Grebennikov. And by the way, you can find Grebenikov's papers online. I would love to pull that up right spontaneously at the moment, because he did these beautiful illustrations of insects. He studied insects and he did these really beautiful illustrations. And he allegedly, guys, Grebennikov, and again, we're talking, and by the way, guys, Pollack goes into this in Charged. I can't find it right now, but he shows the structure of bird wings and how bird wings are able to create electrostatic charge. He says we shouldn't call it static electricity. And other people like William Beatty, the physicist, came across one of his articles, says it's not static electricity, it's just electrostatic charge. It's in charge imbalance. Pollack shows us what bird wings look like at a microscopic level, and he says that if you have gases, air going through these structures, it's going to create electrostatic charge, just like we would find on the leading edge of a B-2 wing. Or Grebennikov, allegedly, just because Jules brought it up, he created this like levitating device that allegedly people saw him like levitating across the ground by attaching a lot of different beetle wings to the bottom of this, creating enough charge. I'm sure it's technically possible to do, which allowed him to levitate. And so again, it's all, see, what I've been looking for, during my, academic life ever since I got involved, universities and PhDs and all this, is you're kind of looking for simplicity. Isn't that really the essence of what we're talking about here? Is some simplicity in all of this, not generating new principles. Do the existing principles we understand explain a lot of this, but we just haven't looked deep enough and far enough? Well, I think the answer is yes. In any case, the book I wanted to mention to you today, before we start looking at Q&A, this is the book that I read a long time ago. It is a sociologist. I don't even know if I had been involved with any of these topics yet. The Elephant in the Room by Eviatar Zerubavel, an Israeli sociologist. Silence and Denial in Everyday Life. So this is just really the point I want to make today. is, I'm not saying like you necessarily have to go out and buy this book. I mean, this is an older book, but people have been writing about this, about why don't we talk about things that are happening around us? Why do we have silence? Why do we have denial? And what Zerubavel says to us in this book is that we're all pressured into a certain view of reality from people around us, friends, parents, and so forth, unconsciously to toe the line with the version of reality we grew up around, right? And so these denial structures start building themselves within our minds and within society as a whole. And it's not just coming from like the big bad government or something like this, or any organized structures. It's coming from within us to deny the existence of phenomena that are not comfortable to talk about. I first came across this talking to my Swiss grandmother who survived Nazi Germany. That's where my father's family is originally from Germany, and they had to flee in the 30s from Nazi Germany. I spent 2 or 3 days with my grandmother in Connecticut before she passed on, doing an oral history, which I could use in college, as a project. And I just remember her telling me how strange it was when the Nazis came to power, one law at a time. It wasn't something that was really fast. It was over years laws were passed. In this case, in Nazi Germany, against Jewish people, but it could be against any minority in any society. But it's just slow. It's a slow progression of discrimination and turning people into second-class citizens, even using the legal process. But the thing that really stuck with me talking to her is that nobody really does anything about it because it's so gradual that you don't really see it. Or if people see it, it's easier to turn away. And eventually, you end up with concentration camps there, as there was a recent movie about this. People could be around those. I forgot what it was called. And you could just like act like everything was okay because you're pushing it away in your mind and other people are pushing it away with you. So the reason now, when I wrote Black Swan Ghosts, and I just have the earlier version of it, there's a newer version, as you know, with a newer cover. You can see it behind me there in a blurry form, a revised edition. I kind of kept going back to Zerubavel because he talked about why you have this denial and how it's like forms its own structure in society. It's like this own immovable, invisible object about talking about certain topics. And I believe that applies to what we call the paranormal, including all the specific topics that we like to talk about on this channel. And we're talking about more and more in our society. And thanks to, the interwebs here, we have more and more podcasts and YouTube broadcasts. We can get as much information as we want now from each other. So what Eviatar tells us is, like, for example, scholars are pressured to confine their intellectual attention to certain conventional zones of academic discourse, fields or disciplines, and to regard any scholarly activity taking place outside them as professionally tangible, if not irrelevant, tangential and irrelevant, and using various incentives and disincentives. He said he was constantly pressured by people within sociology to stay away from history, psychology, and anthropology. Go figure. So, I mean, academia, why so much resistance to study the UFO topic? I mean, I saw some people, what was it, at that university in Albany recently, got this grant, or were the ones who gave the grant to finally look at UAP. It's pretty rare. I'm just down the street here from CU where Condon Report came out. Remember, in the late 60s, saying nothing to see here, folks, move on. By the way, according to people who've actually read through the Condon Report, he did go into ball lightning, which may be kind of cool. But generally he said there's nothing, we should avoid the UFO topic, even though the missile incidents were happening at Minot and Maelstrom around that time, and they didn't even look at that. And if they actually did, but they never talked about it in their report. They did send someone up there according to Bob Salas. But it's sort of an example. You get these academic institutions and you get money flowing around people willing to study it, who are willing to toe the party line. In this case, closing down Project Blue Book. Just right down the street. And Condon says, yep, go ahead, close it down. Nothing going on here. Well, there is something going on down here. If you've talked to anyone from New Jersey recently, you know, there are things flying around in the sky that they didn't see before, the so-called drones. So, you know, this can go on for a while. So I'm just pointing this out. Okay, so I'm just going to quote a couple passages. I'm not going to read too much from this. You can probably find copies of this, I would hope, somewhere. When was this published? Well, it is a while ago, but 2006, not that long ago. The reason it is so difficult to talk about the elephant in the room is not only does no one want to listen, but no one wants to talk about not listening. There you go. In other words, the very act of avoiding the elephant is itself an elephant. So these elephants keep generating more and more elephants in the room. Not only do we avoid it, we do so without acknowledging that we are actually doing so, thereby denying our denial. You see how complex it is, folks? So these structures keep forming more denial structures. Now, the reason I'm talking about this, again, I don't think it's just, you know, conspiratorial groups, secret black budget programs that are the issue here, the official secrecy part of it. And I've spoken to people who know about those programs, people who've been in them and so forth. That's one part of it, but they're counting on the rest of us to stay silent. And, you know, I encountered this once. I mean, in around 2013, I had hired this PR company on Madison Avenue in New York. I didn't go looking for them. I sat next to this guy on a plane, going with my partner to Disney World in Florida. And he said, I love your topics. I'd love to represent you. We could do some really cool things, newspapers, you know. So, okay, so I hired them for a while. We were going to have the New York Times. They were going to do a story about my crop circle tours. And I had, at the time, their woman who did the travel articles in the business section of the New York Times talk to me about crop circle tours and what we do, you know, and the spooky things that happen. And I say, you know, occasionally, you know, we see weird objects out there and people have experiences. And it was about niche travel. It was looking good until the night before that issue came out. I got a call from the PR company, the editor of the business section of the Times, whatever his name was at the time, I can't remember. He just didn't like the topic. End of story. So this, what could have been a cool article about crop circles and crop circle, you know, tourism in the UK, in the business section of the New York Times, it could have been an article. And as one person says, I don't like it. Gone. When I was originally released, Opening Minds, completely done with local graphics artists, editors, and so forth in this area. Locally produced book, printed 5,000 copies. We've got a few left at this point. My local bookstore, and I did some talks around, but the closest bookstore to my office, I won't name them, but they were pretty close by on Pearl Street, refused to let me do an author talk. And it's like, you know, well done book, got great reviews, it's got great pictures, you know. It takes a lot of work to do a book like this. You know, you do the research. I did it on, back then, Word Perfect, okay? And then formatted it correctly. It's just, geez, it's a big project. Locally produced, sold thousands of copies. Bookstores, PR person, I don't like the topics. So this is sort of what happens is you could call them gatekeepers or whatever. You have people along the way that people like myself, authors and other people, you know, they help you communicate to the public about what you're interested in at bookstores and things like this or newspapers. And they, for some reason, are afraid of these topics. They don't like them and it cuts it off. Now, the good news is, folks, I mean, it gradually changes over the years. And I think we're seeing that now. So, you know, it's okay because it all kind of balances out in the long run. But the main thing is that is what we're dealing with. The elephant in the room. I mean, there are just so many good little sections in here. He just keeps going on. I'll just read you one more thing here. This East German satirical poem from the 60s. Remember East Germany? He who turns a deaf ear to his time and is blind to events of the day and utters but little of all that he knows, he alone will survive to grow old. Doubtlessly, though, one condition remains: to live so one must himself be carved of stone. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Carved of stone. So there is a price to this silence, right? We turn into pillars of stone. But I mean, East Germany is a good example. Look how quickly it collapsed once people got sick of it in 1989. I mean, I was working in Vienna that year at EASA, the East-West Research Institute. I could see the beginnings of it that summer. Nobody expected it to collapse so quickly. So this is really what we're dealing with, is these elephants in the room. And as Eviatar tells us, they don't go away on their own that quickly, because it just becomes these patterns. You've probably all encountered this in your family with friends or something at some point, where there is something that you want to talk about, but it becomes hard to talk about it because the denial structures are so strong, right? And there's another example of this. By the way, what elephants in the room lead to eventually are black swan events, because it builds up behind the dam, and then it's like the emperor has no clothes. Remember that story by Hans Christian Andersen, which Eviatar mentions here in The Elephant in the Room? Remember, the elephant had no clothes, the emperor has no clothes, and it's just one kid or someone who says, hey, the emperor has no clothes, and then people realize it. You remove that one chink in the dam, and you start this information flow. I think that's what's going on now. Guys, I think it's irreversible at this point. There is too much information coming out, too many good sources of information, and I think people will just get bored with the older point of view, which is that these things are optical illusions and mistaken misidentifications of Venus, or swamp gas, right? Or flocks of geese, or whatever the explanations have been for different phenomena, or you just saw a bear. These denial structures eventually just play themselves out, in my view. And it becomes so interesting to get involved in the newer side of this for the pure fun of discovering new ideas, the economic aspects, technology, spiritual implications. I just think eventually that grows out of the morass and the decay of these older systems that don't want to engage in these topics, because for the rest of us, we want better ways to live. We want less pollution, lower prices, more time, all these things, which, advances in technology and the systems we live in allow us, leads to that. So it's just natural for the whole thing to evolve. But in the meantime, you have these structures that exist at different levels. So what I think we're going to see, before we get to some of the particular questions you had, is what is the reaction of the media to Age of Disclosure when it's available to the public starting, I believe, tonight? Is it tonight at midnight, or whenever these things become available online? The 21st, as of this broadcast, right? I was already watching one discussion of this. I forget the source. It was somewhere on Twitter X. And they were like cautiously asking their science expert or something. Some of you folks probably saw this already, right? Well, what do you think? It's about UFOs. And this guy says, well, these are pretty credible people, and this topic has been around. I mean, that is how it starts, is the media that we're around. And we have new media now, just like this is a type of media. But the existing media that a lot of people still pay attention to, like I have a friend who said, if it's not on NPR, it's not real to me. I'm sure people like that. My mom, for her, it was like MSNBC. If it wasn't on there, it didn't quite click. Everyone has these channels that they're tuned to. And until they see those people on there, I used to listen to NPR a lot when I was in college or something. Like that was kind of real. Their news, right? And their segments, and so forth. we're all kind of tuned into these sources of legitimacy. And until they're talking about it, doesn't seem real. So I'm wondering, I don't know what you all think. What is going to be the reaction to the age of disclosure? Will it have any impact at all? I mean, from what I can see, there are a lot of pretty influential, well-respected people in that documentary. I've talked to several of them myself personally, off the record, and the types of things that they say and what they can't say. So now the American people and the rest of the world will be able to hear them for themselves too in these, interviews and so forth. And I'm wondering how people will react. Yeah, Shelly, my mom tells me, shut up, no one cares. That's the elephant in the room. And of course, people say that around various types of abuse, and all sorts of activity, criminal activity. Just look away, don't pay attention to it. I mean, I think we've seen it a lot. We're not going to get into politics here, but we can see it with presidential administrations, our current president, where we're not supposed to ask questions. I mean, just yesterday, remember at this press conference where President Trump was asked a question, and then he said, shame on you for asking that question to the Saudi prince that was there about Khashoggi murder. And he said, shame on you, this is our guest, you shouldn't ask that question. That's the elephant in the room, guys. That's exactly the elephant in the room. And I think it's been affecting our topics for a long time. In academics, I remember just getting these lectures, you do want to be successful, right? You put a lot of time into sociology, and publish or perish and all that. There's just a lot of pressure as you get further and further along. And as a friend of mine, Dan, said earlier in the day when I met him over at a coffee shop, and this guy's a small business owner. He's really good at making premium skateboards from the parts directly. It's one of the top premium skateboard companies in the country. And we were talking about this, and he said, well, if telling the truth damages your career, who wants to have a career? Right? So this is pretty serious. And a lot of us have had to make decisions being public about these types of topics. Now because it has ramifications, and you have to decide at some point, do you care or not, or would you rather tell the truth? Now, if you saw the Bigfoot, Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, now, great series of movies. There's two more coming out that I'm aware of. First one was a Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, with interviews with lots of Bigfoot experts and witnesses and so forth. That was one of my first, Bigfoot movies that I really paid attention to in recent times. I was in the second one called Paranormal Bigfoot. But in the first one, remember they had all these psychological professionals in there in the latter part of the show. So this is where the elephant in the room leads to. What these folks said, these psychiatric professionals said, is they think many people have had Bigfoot encounters and they don't remember it. Your brain and your mind have so many strong defense mechanisms that keep us alive from the daily events that happen to us, daily, weekly, monthly, stressful events, sometimes violent events, accidents, things like this. Your brain has millions of years of evolution to handle things that don't fit with your ordinary experience of reality, right? That it has mechanisms to forget very quickly about encounters that don't fit, that your mind doesn't want to process, that it doesn't feel it serves you for survival. There it is, Bigfoot Society. Jeremiah, thank you yes, we had a great interview a couple of weeks ago. So if you watch Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, which I encourage you to do, what you learn is that people forget about their encounters almost immediately. And I have read encounters of people that perhaps they saw a Bigfoot or a dogman type creature, And in one case, I remember reading that a woman was riding, her boyfriend was in the second car behind her, and she saw this dogman type creature by the road as she drove by with the glowing red eyes, and it's super tall and it looks like a huge bipedal wolf dog. And she forgot about it 15 by the time she got home, until her boyfriend said, "What was that we saw on the road?" She had already forgotten about it. So it's quite possible, and I think based on my research into, with remote viewing, resonant viewing, about how we perceive subtle uh, information and perceptions, our conscious mind, and those of you who are involved with RV, it's so strong, our conscious mind, that it can get you to forget about things uh, that you've experienced that don't quite fit with what the conscious mind thinks is going on. And maybe that's part of its job, so that there is this kind of linear consistency to our experiences all day long, right? So you can forget about these encounters, and maybe more of us, like, I don't consciously remember ever having seen a Bigfoot type creature. I wrote about in Opening Minds about some sort of vision of a reptilian type creature when I was on a teen camping trip out in Utah in the 70s, whatever that was. It was like a quick switch to another reality, maybe this decoupled reality that Shoulders talks about. Something switched and I saw it. The people vanished at the campfire, and then they all came back and it was normal again, whatever that was. I can't consciously remember having seen a Bigfoot, but what these psychiatric professionals argue is that more people have encountered this and don't consciously remember it, which would apply to maybe all these types of phenomena. Maybe we're encountering them all the time and we're not remembering them because of the elephant in the room phenomena, because of the social pressure, because we're all busy people with things that we have to do every day to survive in a modern society, that our minds push it away. And it isn't till we have movies come out like Age of Disclosure and repeated sort of media events where memories come back to people and we can start collectively talking about it, right? So, by the way, so Flash of Beauty, those guys, the Resonance Pro crew in Portland, do a great job with these movies. I mean, if you've seen any of them, they're just so well put together and they're so watchable. They have an excellent YouTube channel, A Flash of Beauty, with new witnesses all the time. You should watch it just to listen to these witness interviews of what they've seen, just to hear it from people who've encountered this directly. So the next movie that I know is coming out is Voices in the Wilderness, about the Sierra camp up in the high Sierras, from the Johnson brothers, and from the author, Paranormal, Bigfoot, and Voices in the Wilderness. Excuse me, I'm forgot his. When we've had him on we've had him on here a couple times, and Ron Moorhead, yeah. So Ron's other experiences up there. So it's the first documentary ever about this verification of all the audio evidence of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, right next to their hunting structure. By the way, I was told by someone who did historic preservation that hunting structure shouldn't have been taken down by the Forest Service. It should have stayed up as a historic site. Okay, from someone in that business, by the way. But it's all about that. And I've seen a preview of it at the Olympic Strange Days event a year ago, which I believe you can sign up for next year. I think it's in the Forks area in Washington. It's really interesting listening to these early accounts by people who don't know anything of, we're not Bigfoot believers or anything like that. And, this hits home really close, because people I've talked to who have encountered Bigfoot, it's sometimes very difficult for them to talk about it. And it's not just Bigfoot, it's other types of phenomena like this. It's anything that comes up close, and it could be these other types of creatures that I'm not even sure we know what even to call them, right? Hominid type creatures. We don't even know that. See, look, just talking about this as an example, we don't know the history, our own history as human beings. How do we fit in with these creatures that are seem part animal and are also bipedal? Because if you read the scientific literature, it says the only bipedal animal is a human. So how do we account for these bipedal animals? The immediate response from academics and people would say, well, it just doesn't exist. But you know it exists because you've talked to enough people who've experienced it. And all the variations on Bigfoot, you know, dogmen, goatmen, other types of creatures, some that just keep going on of this spectrum of bipedal creatures, or creatures that are both bipedal and quadrupedal. And it confuses our mind. So the easiest way to deal with it for the, you know, organized scientific, you know, organizations out there is to deny it. And I sometimes write letters to Science Magazine about this. They've published some occasionally. I wrote to them about, I've written to them about fluoride a couple times, about why they're so pro fluoride when the evidence shows that it's not good for developing children's brains. It's osteoporosis, toxic, chemical, highly reactive, doesn't belong in water or in your body. It all doesn't do anything positive. And nature does everything it can in our bodies to get rid of it. I've written to them, and sometimes they publish these letters, and I've written to them about sometimes their attitude towards UFO stories and things, and they sort of make fun of these things. They're taking this biased view that's not based on the evidence, and that's why this keeps being an elephant in the room. Is, you know, I think, who was it, Max Planck, or which one of these fathers of quantum science? I mean, they were mostly guys back then, 120 years ago. I mean, who said it? Was it Max Planck, that science progresses one funeral at a time? Okay. And so anyway, that's sort of, folks, just to sum it up, that we'll do some Q&A. I'll take a look at what you said. Oh, by the way, so the fourth Flash of Beauty movie, that is about Native American experience of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever. There's so many names for Sasquatch, Siatko, Gogit, Sabe, hundreds of names for this creature. I imagine from people who couldn't talk to each other because they spoke different languages. There were so many different native languages here before the Europeans came to this continent here in the U.S. And they all had a name for this creature. So it's about the Native American experience. And there's an extensive section, which I've seen a preview to, about Bigfoot in Alaska, which you got to brace yourself for those types of encounters there. Not always like our encounters down here in the U.S. They can be much more antagonistic and potentially violent than the ones that we often hear about in the lower 48 for whatever reason. Maybe they're just more used to being left alone up there. But so those are both coming up. You can look forward to those movies. I think the Voices in the Wilderness was a Kickstarter project that was funded. So we can look forward to those movies. Now, right here in our chat, we have our luscious Jules. And, you know, we've had a Bigfoot group, a Zoom group, which if you've had an experience you'd like to join at some point, we'll start it again and open it up to the public. And Jules has shared her experience of seeing one in Indiana as a child, you know, picking berries, white-haired Bigfoot, if I remember correctly, picking berries. And I'm just using this as an example because I know Jules is okay with me talking about this. What did her mom say to her when Jules told her about this? That it was the neighbor in a fur coat in July in Indiana. As far as I know, Indiana, like a lot of the country, it's pretty hot in July. No one's wearing a fur coat. That's the elephant in the room example. It's just, no, you didn't see that. You saw the neighbor, Mr. Jones, in a fur coat, right, Jules? And this is what people get from law enforcement authorities from their Bigfoot sightings, right? It's you saw a bear. It had to be a bear, right? And if you don't say you saw a bear, if it's someone who works for the Fire Service or the National Park Service, right? Or one of these state park services, you saw a bear, right? If you know what's good for you, if you want to keep your jobs. That's what we're talking about here. And that's what needs to change gradually. People need to realize it's better to tell the truth. It's better to talk about it openly, right? You guys get the point here. So, in any case, the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room leads to black swan events. If you're not careful, again, just going back to what I said, what I think is going to happen here is more witnesses are going to come forward slowly, and it's really going to build. There's going to be a pressure, and the media will be less and less hostile and acerbic towards, like, for example, the UFO topic. I've spoken to enough friends in New Jersey recently who keep seeing these objects. As I mentioned before, folks, when I was driving through New Jersey last December, about a year ago, I saw a very strange plane that had lights on it that don't fit any FAA approved pattern going over Patterson level, and it made a flat turn. Usually planes have to, when they turn, flat turn. What was that? It just looked like something imitating a plane to my mind. And it wasn't on Flight Radar 24. I checked the app later. You can see all the planes. Nope. What was that? There's a friend of mine who was a longtime pilot said to me, Lyle, he said, well, if it wasn't on Flight Radar 24, it wasn't a plane. Okay. And Lyle shared some of his stories in Black Swan Ghost, by the way. Some very interesting cases in there. So, in any case, I think we have a lot to look forward to in this information unfolding. And again, the main point here, what I wanted to make today, again, thanks for listening, is it has a lot to do with us too. It's not just suppression of information from above, from organizations and so forth. A lot of it has to do with us and our neighbors and friends and colleagues and people at work and so forth. How do they react? How comfortable are we in sharing this information? And as you know, if it doesn't get shared, you can begin to forget about it. I have been amazed at some of the cases in Black Swan Ghosts. When I've brought it up to these people again, when I've talked, they already forgot about it. And they're great stories. They had already forgotten. They had told me, which is why I wanted to get it down in print before it got forgotten. Can you imagine these really excellent stories of encounters and government reactions and people in the military and what happened? How they were told not to talk about it, and those sorts of stories already get forgotten pretty quickly if we're not careful about it. So, in any case, that's the other component of this, the elephant in the room. The social science perspective on silence and denial. So, let's go back to questions before we end for today. And you can put them in the box. Now, I believe the corkster here did you ask me about my most interesting paranormal experience? Okay, so I've been thinking about this a lot. In fact, guys, I can't go through a day without thinking about this. This was, as Jules likes me to point out, the guy in Japan that could do PK. When I was teaching RV there from like 2003 to 2008, I would go over for about 4 to 6 weeks. A publishing company hired me to teach RV in Tokyo, Osaka, and Fukuoka. And those are the three main places. And these were large classes because there are a lot of people in Japan. The first class I had was like 64 people. It was my largest RV class ever. Eventually, I met someone took my class who was a surgeon in Tokyo. And he said that outside of Nagasaki, there was this fellow that you would go to have lunch at his place. His wife would make lunch. You paid for the lunch, and then he would do this demonstration of real PK. And I saw glass melted and turned into like a liquid and twisted, objects levitating over his palm. He was able to make my watch hands move around. At the end, this surgeon took me up to meet him, and he said, I can give me your watch if you don't mind, it might break, whatever. It wasn't this watch, but he made the minute hand move ahead of where it had been when I gave it to him, just by putting his palms over it. I saw him twice, and he did things like you drew a picture, folded it into an envelope, and he was able to reproduce it, then take it out of the envelope and so forth. Now, I can't discount that some of this might have been very well done magic, just because magicians do things like this that look like that. But I know that, Corky, I know that a fellow in my RV class had been friends with one of the founders of Sony, Morita, one of the there were two co-founders of Sony, I believe. And this fellow told me that they had taken their best camera to film this guy doing PK, he didn't want publicity. He told me that he didn't want to be even better known. He didn't want a lot of people coming there and skeptics and so forth. He said that when skeptics came there, groups of them, it didn't work as well, which would kind of make sense if you're thinking of like a chi energy field generated by your body, that your own psychology would affect that. And he hadn't been born this way. It took him 10 years he said, to perfect this. They'd filmed him, Sony had filmed him with their best camera at 10,000 frames a second, could not see any threads, tricks, or anything like this. So the really thing that really blew my mind there was he could levitate yen notes above his palm, and he was levitating a cigarette, and it's floating there. And I don't know, my mind's thinking, is there a string of, thread? I don't know, he just looks right at me. I remember this look. It was really like startling. He looked straight in my direction, and the cigarette flew off his palm. I'm about 12 feet away. I'm in the back row. He's doing this behind a counter. It flies directly towards me like this and makes a right angle turn into my shirt pocket. An open shirt pocket. Goes right in, like with force. So I would say, Corky, I think that was the strangest thing that I've seen. I mean, I've seen this with my eyes. I saw the cigarette going in to my pocket it looked like a torpedo coming across the room. It came at a constant speed, and it made a right angle turn and went into my pocket as if someone had touched it right there and knew where to turn it. And he's doing this with his intention. Now, I finally decided to ask AI how he did it, right? Of course, what do you think? I asked ChatGPT, how did this person direct a cigarette into my shirt pocket from a distance of like 10, 12 feet away? And of course, what did ChatGPT say? What do you guys think? What did ChatGPT say? Well, it's a well-known magic trick. There's a little thread. It's really small thread. You can't see it. And I'm sure this magic trick exists. But and it's the reason that it's floating and going side to side is because it's on a thread. But it wasn't going side to side. It was just rotating above his palm. Kind of an inch or two off. Just, it's strange enough to see that, let alone seeing it fly across the room. So I kept engaging with ChatGPT a little bit. I was saying, but I didn't see a thread. Is it possible it was done through some sort of projection of a human energy field? Ideas we've learned at MFMP, neutrinos, cold neutrinos, static charges, some projection. The way people that do PK, Ninel Kalugina from the Soviet Union, you can see examples of her video of her moving things around without touching them. And other people that could do that, Ingo Swann, Uri Geller, right? And then ChatGPT came back and said, of course you didn't see the thread. That's why it makes it a magic trick. It's really small. It's only 2 microns big. And I said, how to get in my shirt pocket? Well, the thread was attached somehow to your inside of your shirt pocket. Yeah. No, I don't think so. So, guys, but it didn't end there, because another time when I went back, the second time I saw him, and I'm not sure if he's still there or what happened, because he didn't want publicity, no website. I told him I could talk about it on my radio interviews. Back then it was radio interviews. 2034. Yeah. No, didn't want publicity. So here's where it got interesting. Again, Corks would understand this, Corky, because Corky's often on the Bob Greenyer's MFMP broadcasts. So he's heard this before, but I felt it. Pins and needles effect. He said, roll down your sleeve. I rolled it down. He ran his hand over my arm at a couple distances, and it felt like pins going in, pins and needles in the bone, guys, not at the surface, inside. So what was that? Is it some sort of neutrinos going in there, stimulating the nerve cells, breaking nerve cells or something. I mean, I don't know what it was, but when you look at Nikola Tesla, at Peter Lindemann's presentation of radiant energy, you can see these videos on YouTube. Peter Lindemann was a researcher, I believe, from Medellin Falls, Washington, who looked at some of these cold electricity, radiant electricity, and what Tesla was talking about. And what did Tesla say around some of these experiments? Tesla said he felt pins and needles going into his body from these pulse discharge, disruptive discharge devices, from bunching up the electrons together and the types of charge imbalances and stuff that it creates. So people have felt this before. And you look at other descriptions of radiant electricity, it's pins and needles. I felt the pins and needles. I mean, not from my leg falling asleep while I'm on a sofa too long or in a chair. I mean, that projection from someone's hands. In that documentary, do you remember the Ring of Fire documentary with those two brothers that went to the Pacific Islands in the 80s? It was on PBS. It was called Ring of Fire. And they were like the first Caucasians to go out to some of these Pacific Islands and meet the islanders, including where one of the Rockefellers went and had his unfortunate demise there when they decided to become cannibals, allegedly. He went to those places too. And somewhere along there, one of the brothers gets sick and they need to find some help, I believe, in Jakarta. Is it Indonesia somewhere? And they run into this guy. Now, you can see it on the film and you can look this up, where he ignites newspaper from a distance with his palm, with that, what we can call chi energy. He ignites a newspaper. You can see it. And there are other examples where he's standing a few inches away from the camera people and they're feeling that pins and needles effect, that electric shock he can create. Kind of like a human electric eel, but without any contact, not through the medium of water or something, right through the air. So that guy, there is a book, The Magus of Indonesia, I believe it's called. The guy's name was Chang, and someone wrote a book who saw those Ring of Fire documentaries and had to meet this guy. There's a book you can get about him, The Magus of something, I forget, Bali or something like this. And it's all about John Chang, and he talks. This guy gets from Greece, goes over to meet him, and John Chang talks about bioenergy cultivation of our own energy fields, and so forth. Now, Quarks, you asked earlier on. We'll get to some other questions, but Quarks and I kind of know each other. We've met a couple times at Cosmic Summit and so forth, and we interact. That was, this is sort of the same sort of thing. My experience of this started learning with Tai Chi. I started with Paul Gallagher, who was a very accomplished Tai Chi teacher. He had studied with Jungman Jing originally, I believe, originally from China, Tai Chi. And I started learning this in college. So as a teenager, I'm learning about Tai Chi, Qigong. Later on, I studied with Mantak Chia, and Qi cultivation is something that, is part of my life every day. And I think it's very important to keep a balanced Qi field because of all the energies around us and negativity to kind of maintain the integrity of your own energy field. So practicing Qigong, and something we can talk about another time. For me, it's always very important being out in nature, having a healthy Qi field is important. I kind of get intellectually how you could extend that if you practiced enough, like this guy I saw near Nagasaki, or John Chang, or other people, Ninel Kaligina, who in the Soviet Union. And there's those videos of all those scientists standing around her, and there's a glass box, and she's just moving her hands around, and the objects are moving around, because as Bob Greenyer's talked about, she said she was affected by thunderstorms. And it would physically exhaust her. And during solar flares and things, it would affect her ability. So it shows that there's an electromagnetic component. We have this electromagnetic capacity, and we don't know about it very much. And people who are very accomplished in these arts can essentially project an electromagnetic field, a force field from their hands or wherever third eye, and they're projecting energy, which, you know, we've called prana or chi or ruach, or, you know, in from the Old Testament, right? So again, this is stuff that we haven't really talked about this a lot in Western society. This is something that's part of Asian society. They believe in these things. You know, having taught RV in Japan, they were very open to RV. They didn't have the kind of inherent skepticism. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being inherently skeptical. It's fine. I consider myself, you know, like a reasonably skeptical person too. Of course, I'm open to evidence. But it's something that a good portion of the Earth's population already believes is possible. And Western science, for whatever reason, hasn't been very open to it because it's harder to measure. It's not as visible. Maybe it doesn't get you those promotions and grants that you want from the granting agencies. The control system, what Ingo Swann called reality boxes. Okay, you guys get the idea. So let's yeah, thunderstorms are great, Jules. I mean, this is the negative ions, the whole thing. By the way, folks, just going through Science Magazine recently, it said that streams can create charge clusters. You can generate electrostatic charge just from moving water, which is why it feels good to be around bodies of water and streams, so forth. I think Bob Greenyer has recently did a presentation where he suggests maybe that's why humans like to live around bodies of water, because it creates natural nucleonic transmutation of elements. I mean, this is one area where it looks like modern science got it wrong. There really is nucleosynthesis. We have enough experiments now. Proton 21 Labs, originally from Ukraine, then went into some sort of black budget DOE program, cold fusion, nuclear alchemical type of experiments with like 8,000 successful experiments with the same results. This is why DOE was interested in them. And they moved to Oak Ridge. And that is alchemy. So what you and I were taught in high school, you can't transmute lead into gold. You can, apparently, or something like that. You can create a lot of different chemical elements from any base metals. All of the elements in the periodic table, like Mark Leclerc demonstrated just through sonofusion. Mark Leclerc came to the breakthrough energy movement here in Boulder a number of years ago, and I saw him lecture about using cavitation, sound energy, sonic energy, ultrasonic energy to create this nucleonic transmutation. But it's something you have to be careful of. He and his business partner got cancer from doing this. They did it too hard. They did it too much. But in principle, it exists, but you need to take the proper safety procedures. So let's go back to some of the questions here. Thanks for listening today. Let's see. Michael, thanks for being an Opening Minds fan. I'm proud to say that I appreciate your comment there. I still think, 23 years later, I don't think there's anything here I would change in the book at all. I still think that there are energy fields that modern science doesn't recognize, and it have to have an open mind if you want to start seeing it. Look outside the box a little bit. So, and I do think we discovered some of this around crop circles. What I think we discovered around crop circles, in case any of you are wondering, it wasn't just that, they're made by multiple sources. They're, as I mentioned in Black Swan Ghost, people have seen discs over fields flattening the meadow. There are examples of UFOs leaving these shapes behind. People made them. I ended up making them too. They're fun to make. Most of the time we paid the farmer. If it wasn't just some random field, we would arrange with the farmer. Anything big, we would pay them. And we found it changed the electrostatic gradient to have that pattern there versus a regular old wheat field with the standing stalks separated. When they're all anisotropic helical, it creates another pattern of electrostatic charge, which may be why we get balls of light, ball lightning around crop circles, which I've actually seen with my own eyes twice in the UK. Once beneath a cloud hanging there, which I was able to get on video. Another time, like a glowing blue grapefruit. I had another person there. We both saw this kind of like emerge from the ground, really strange. But now I know what that is. It's a ball lightning. So, Jules says she's going to smoke that cigarette. I have it somewhere, and there are no magnets in it, and there's no thread. Jeez, ChatGPT. There's no. It's just a cigarette. Uh, I am not saying that magicians couldn't do something that looked like it, but I mean, I can make something that looks like a UFO. I've seen this over in Wiltshire. You could take a balloon and put a helium gas in it to make it float and put a glow stick, and that'll look pretty weird. I saw that once from a field with Linda Moulton Howe on Woodborough Hill. We were both bemused by it until I found out later someone had made that for a Japanese film crew just to show them what it would look like for a UFO to come over a crop circle. Whether it was a demonstration or they were trying to trick this Japanese film crew over in the Eastfield. But I saw, a glow stick in a balloon. I mean, that looks like a UFO, UAP, or ball lightning, but that doesn't mean that the real ball lightning doesn't exist. And it's the same thing with these. This is the typical explanation that people have for these phenomena. And I think, also be honest, I think people are almost threatened by seeing something like this because, we have these worldviews. And when I saw that cigarette flying at me, I went to bed that night feeling kind of disturbed by it. And it wasn't just that. He was able to do something very interesting with Polaroid film. He would take a picture of you. This is coming back to my mind right now. And when the film was developed, there were images of faces next to you, ghostly images. And everyone there who had their photos taken said it was of a deceased relative or pet. And I talked to these guys on a train coming back to Tokyo with my friend there. And I said, is that really your relative? They were like looking at this photo. I said, yeah, this is one of my relatives that passed away a couple of years ago. It really looks like them. How did he do something like that? I can't even understand that. And then my friend and I were saying, how is this possible? I mean, how would he doesn't know them directly, and he's impressing the image of the relative on the film next to them. Now, I've seen this with Mark Macy, who was a researcher here in Boulder with instrumental trans-spirit communication. We can talk about that another time. He had these recordings of his phone conversation with deceased spirits, people he had known who had passed on, and they would call back on the phone, and he had the recordings of them, and it was very interesting. It doesn't sound quite like their voice now, but close enough they could identify him. A little, wispier, but a little different, but similar. And we were saying on the train going back, maybe these were like his compatriots. We couldn't make sense of it. Did he have them come just to pretend it looked like their relatives? I don't know, guys, but it gets into this whole other area. Is Ken Shoulders, when he's talking about permittivity transitions, are there other life forms in our space around us that we're not conscious of, and they're there with different electromagnetic constants, separated from us, decoupled, the way Shoulders described it. So again, as you can see, I think there's a science behind this. It's not reductionist scientists saying we've explained it. It just means there are some principles out there that have to do with these phenomena. It does repeat itself. I'm sure some of you have experienced this with your own encounters, whether it be a sudden cold in the room. You read this over and over again. Police officers responding to houses, coming into a room that's suddenly very cold and weird. Those types of silence, the sense of foreboding, the space-time distortions. Like, you've heard about these cases, folks, where people perceive a Bigfoot coming around maybe their trailer home or something, and all of a sudden a couple hours go by and they're still standing there. The person's still standing. It's like the morning's here and they don't even know they would feel sore if they were standing there all that time, right? They just, even their dog, they all come back to consciousness at once. Around cryptids, UFOs, other types of time slips. Okay, you want to talk about a really weird topic, folks? Time slips. There have been some good cases of this on Sasquatch Chronicles a couple months ago, a couple in a row, of people visiting kind of weird places. They went back and they didn't exist anymore. They had been apparently bulldozed over decades ago, but everyone remembers them talking to the people in the house or something. But they had those same symptoms: coldness, silence, so it suggests the presence of not necessarily multiverses. That could be what it is, parallel realities. But I think the way I've been thinking about it more is decoupled organisms and life forms within our own reality, right? With different electromagnetic constants. And, as Jules and I often comment, and in our groups and online Zoom groups and things, it's people who discovered electromagnetism, Michael Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell. I mean, they were not accepted at the time they did that. People did not believe. These were called imponderables. They didn't believe in invisible things like radio waves. That radio waves were predicted from Maxwell's theories and laws of electromagnetism. Predicted invisible radio waves as an extension. From what I read from calculus, it predicted the existence of radio waves. And even the first people that discovered this, David Hughes, the British American inventor, in 1879, I believe, before Heinrich Hertz, people told him it was just magnetic induction. It wasn't really a radio wave. And he had already discovered it in the lab. So anyone who discovers these new things faces this hostility and accusations of witchcraft and, similar accusations of, something dark and diabolical. Well, it is dark, like dark matter, but it's not inherently scary. It's just not necessarily easy to understand. Or if it is easy to understand, we just haven't bothered to. People have told us not to go in that direction, right? So, let's see. Before we've been going a long time today, guys. So thanks. Any other questions here? Yes, Bichkov. Thank you, Corky. Bichkov is a Russian researcher on ball lightning. Corks and I have talked about this a lot, Corky. And we learned about this from Bob Greenyer. And these books about ball lightning are fascinating. There are 2 Air Force studies about ball lightning. Lots of Russian research, research in different countries. It's such a strange topic that people called it different things, and there was no agreement. There was even this argument it was some sort of hallucination in the brain, which I think we've discounted now with all of our photographic evidence. There was a good case. Did you see that ball lightning from was it Alberta on YouTube, that Alberta rural farm or something? That was the real thing. And so, talking to people who've encountered ball lightning, and apparently 20% of the U.S. population has encountered ball lightning. Now, I imagine that would be 20% of the world, according to the Eric Davis 2003 ball lightning study. Again, this has something to do with it. Ball lightning changes these electromagnetic constants. It has this persistence, but it goes through walls. It goes through glass. It acts in strange ways, and it seems conscious, and it interfaces with the whole subject of orbs and life forms that seem to be sentient, which I honestly I cannot completely explain, and it opens the doors to a lot of other questions. This sort of sentience around ball lightning, what people report on Skinwalker Ranch, right? Yeah, the skull experiments, Jules. How did they project those images? It's a good question. AC/DC. So are you guys talking about the concert, the recent AC/DC concert? CBD strain. Okay, fine. Thank you, Mr. Sandman. Yes, so thanks, Jules. I have a Patreon page, Dark Matter Mysteries. So, folks, as you can see, I think there's a lot to be discovered here. I think we're headed towards very interesting times. I mean, I can just see it going that direction, even from having a 30-year subscription to Science Magazine. If people are interested in these topics, I think eventually it validates a lot of people's experiences. As a sociologist, my training is not to judge people's experiences. It's just to record what they say. They've seen. It's not to make this snap judgment whether it's real or not, or swamp gas. It's not to explain it away. Just like, what do they say they're experiencing? Later on, you can start to look. Do they have a motivation for saying that? How valid is it? So that's a whole different set of questions. And unfortunately, the type of science we've encountered all of us. It's just been this knee-jerk denial reaction. And that isn't science. You need to look at the evidence objectively. If you make a determination later that it had an ordinary explanation or something, fine. I'm sure some of these phenomena do, but that doesn't mean there isn't a core of this that's actually real, that, you know, connects back to ball lightning, micro ball lightning, electrostatic charges, these attractive, very powerful attractive forces at small scales, and all of these other phenomena that we're interested in, the symptoms we see around it, the features of it at these paranormal hotspots. I mean, if you're interested in why we have these hotspots, I mean, because you read these cases, Marley Woods, remember, from Alan Hynek's, Ted Phillips, Alec Hynek's assistant, you know, thousands of trace case landing cases, the Marley Woods in Missouri, Skinwalker Ranch, the Rocky Mountain Ranch, you know, Katie Page, Rocky Mountain Ranch, the Bradshaw Ranch. You know, I was in that documentary from those folks that did that Bradshaw Ranch out in Sedona. Those areas, in my view, and I'm happy to be wrong, they seem to have a lot of electrostatic charge, either from gilsonite or silicon or something like this, right? Naturally, these are natural insulators that build up a lot of charge, and they can release it suddenly. They can create these charge clusters. And it would seem that these organisms that people see around these ranches, the orbs, the cryptids, the Bigfoot, strange creatures and others, it seems to me that they're feeding off of this charge. It's almost like a food for them, or a background environment that they can emerge from wherever they exist into our reality through this continuity that's created by electrostatic charge. I think that has something to do with it, and that's why you have these paranormal hotspots. Yeah, Thinker Thunker, he always does great stuff. I enjoy listening to him. Yeah, John Chang starting fire with Chi. Thanks, Jewel. She posted this. Let me put this up. Thank you. YouTube link to John Chang. You can see this. Now, again, I didn't see this with my eyes. It was when I saw the documentary from these two brothers from Britain who had traveled through the Pacific Islanders, and you know they show the camera people like jumping back from the shocks. It's a real thing. So, what is it? How do some people do this? How do we measure it up? You know? Yeah, no, Douglas, I agree with you. The bear excuse, it's ridiculous. You remember that woman Claire from Sasquatch Chronicles? When the police show up, she goes back to her motel after being like dragged back from the beach to the parking lot by these creatures. Episode 515, as Ron Moorhead always reminds me. I mean, she's what really inspired me to write Dark Matter Monsters, because her case was, I mean, this woman taking a break from being an interpreter for American companies, language specialist. She goes out to the South Carmel Highlands natural area near Carmel, California, and she's just sitting there with the lens falls off, and these creatures have come out that she said looked almost serpent-like coming across the beach, the way they moved, kind of like cats or reptiles. And then the lens falls, and the big one, like, and they're out there fishing for the seaweed, the male is, and giving it to the females. And the lens falls off, and they turn towards her. When they see her, she like, and she said, the male, like, it's anger, punched its fist into the sand, it shook, and she just like fell unconscious. And the females were holding this male back because it was like, surprised them, you know, right there on the beach near Carmel. You guys have been out to Carmel, California, right? Beautiful town on the beach, and it's where Clint Eastwood lived, and it's a dog-friendly beach. I went out there once. A lot of dogs running around on the right south of there. There were some Asilomar conferences. That's how I was out there. The IS, International Study of System Sciences conference. I go out there anyway. And then she goes back, and she's got bruises, and they've dragged her back to the parking lot, and she calls the police, and they say, you saw a bear. And, you know, whoever those two guys who always showed up in denim and said, you saw a bear. If you know it's good for you, or they threatened her, we're going to kick you out of the country. It's ridiculous. Right. You saw a bear. And she says, I know what bears look like. There's no bleeping way I saw a bear. Okay. And that's what everybody says, Douglas, right? We know what bears look like. We've all seen bears. These are not bears. And it's just silly. And that's denial, ghost, elephant in the room stuff. So, Shelly, what someone said to me, were you the one who made the comment, Shelly, on my channel? If you ask ChatGPT something, you could tell it to exclude the Skeptical Inquirer and Wikipedia in its answer. Because sometimes it's awfully biased towards typical, typical negative reactions, not an honest reaction to your question you're asking. So in any case, folks, I think the best is yet to come with these phenomena. I think we're going to see a convergence of the research slowly around these different topics. And we're going to see some really cool science around this. I think it's going in that direction. Anything could happen. I mean, maybe someone's going to decide in our government organizations somewhere that we should just start talking about this. I don't know when that day is going to come, but it'll come someday. It's not that far away at this point, in my view. And then we're going to have a lot of witnesses come forward who you haven't heard from yet. I would love to give you the names of some of these people who have talked to me with the weird things they've seen. Some of these people were 100% sure they saw extraterrestrial technology. And I said, well, why? Is this because the engineering was so tiny, atomic scale engineering? We don't do that. We don't have the capacity for atomic scale electronic engineering. Electronic, that's probably the wrong word. It's sort of quantum electrodynamic engineering at that scale where the materials literally change the shape of space-time. That's what I'm told people have seen. Excuse me, let me take this off. So let me put a few more before we go for today. Let's see. I could have put more, but I forgot to do this, folks. You can add your comments to the broadcast here, which is always fun. Yeah. I think we have a lot of abilities personally, having studied Qigong, Tai Chi. Even when I was younger, I just did meditation, TM when I was a teenager. I think we just have a huge capacity, and there isn't anyone who wants to teach us about this because it's not in any of their interests for us to. It kind of breaks us out of the cage. And it's not necessarily because these are bad people. It's their organizations don't benefit from us being free and having total access to our natural abilities, which part of that is electromagnetic energetic abilities. I think with proper training, how do we determine the speed of an object if you know exactly where it's from? Oh, it's a good question. You can use laser rangefinders and there are different radar. There are different mechanisms for determining object speed objectively, from my knowledge of it. Radar, lasers, things like this. Sound waves. Yeah. That's a good question. I'm going to think about that one. Clocks and photons. So anyway, folks, let's see any more. I'm going to scroll to the bottom here. Thanks for listening. Boy, we went a long time here. I was just going to do this for an hour, and here we are, an hour and 45 minutes. Yeah, take a look at John Chang. You can. There are people. He learned this. Now, you read that book about John Chang, and I'm going to look it up for you before we part. It's on my Kindle reader somewhere. You look at John Chang, and what he said is that he had a teacher who taught him about these things. And John Chang said that his teacher made him promise The Magus of Java. The Magus of Java by Rasta Danois, Danaos. Teachings of an Authentic Taoist Immortal. Yeah, I think these things are real. You've talked to these Qigong teachers, some of the people they've studied with. I think this is a reality, and it takes some training to have your Qi field, survive forever. the sort of Taoist immortality, and these other symptoms that you've sort of engaged that field from what we're talking about here. So the John Chang video, you can just see him igniting newspaper. He's not touching it. And Chang says, from the book, he had a teacher that he sought out once. And this teacher said, I promise to teach you this, but you can't charge any money for this. You just have to use this for healing. And Chang became a very successful businessman. I think he was also involved in construction and things like that in Indonesia. So he was also a very practical person. He was a cigarette smoker, but he was also this Qigong expert, right? And one more book about this. Remember that book by Paul Dong and Raphael, China's Super Psychics? China's Super Psychics, I believe that's what it's called. That had a lot of cases of the Chinese government, so many people in China, 1 billion people, they could survey the population for people with these natural psychic abilities, most of them being younger people or teenagers who could, project things through glass and make flowers bloom and things like this, and other people that had these abilities. I'm not saying that we should develop this. You should develop what you've got in a way that works with who you are. You don't have to force yourself to have these special powers. It just seems that some people have them. And it proves to us that we all have that to some capacity or another, which means that there's another type of bioenergetics going on that, again, in Western society, it doesn't seem there's been a lot of official funding for this type of research for whatever reason. No, I didn't know, guys, I never met John Chang. He's just the sort of type of person I met in Japan. So in case, can you send it? I don't know how to send a Bigfoot your way, but I mean, maybe people say when you're ready to meet a Bigfoot, they'll meet you. They're out there. I have seen presentations recently. I saw some in the Blue Mountains in Washington when I was with Barb Shoup this past summer. We had a presentation, and this guy was showing us, I forget his name. He had been to Europe a lot, and he showed us a slideshow where he showed us what he said were it could have been tree structures right outside major European cities. Okay. Right at the edge of town, parks and places. So maybe they're around more than we think. We just don't perceive them a lot. It's a big possibility, not just what we thought that they're out there in the Cascades in the Washington State and Oregon. I mean, they're around lots of different places. I was just listening to a case from the Flash of Beauty from, is it Jesus Payan, or he was in the Breaking Bad TV series, and he became a Bigfoot researcher. He described places where I just was recently for the IRVA conference near Tularosa. We were up in Cloudcroft, but we had a barbecue out at Tularosa at a ranch. And he was talking about hearing them right by, I was just out there in the desert area, in the scrub desert. And there, he said that was his first encounter before he started going all over New Mexico, looking for them and so forth. So they're around. Maybe they'll find you. So, yeah. So thanks, everyone. Okay, folks. Well, thanks very much. Let me look for a couple more questions here. Feel free to go to my channel. As Jules is pointing out, I have like a free mini class if you go to learnrv.org. Learnrv.org. I just have a free sequence of videos just to practice RV, like the basics, how it works, how to sense that subtle perception in your mind. I have found this very useful. I found RV, it's very useful to get in touch with that type of intuition within yourself, to remember your dreams more from nighttime, to get intuitive hunches about things. I think it's a very valuable thing to learn, just to get to know your own mind, whatever practical purpose you put it to, just learning it. We have a monthly group. If you'd like to join our group, you can go to learnrv.org to learn more about our group. If you don't need any training, and we have beginners in the group, and it is monthly practice. Just we have a target, and we all we work on it. I need the session. I know what the target is, but the people in the group, you view it. We just had one last week. And it's a lot of fun if you want to get some practice. Yes. Yes, Barb Shoop is a lot of fun. It was great spending some time with her. And you're right, Corky. I have an interview with her from last summer. If you look at my YouTube channel, from her and another fellow talking about their sightings in that area where we were camping, where some of this famous video footage was filmed and so forth, including that arm coming down the tree, that hairy arm, which people saw and they were able to film it apparently from a juvenile coming down the tree and so forth. They showed me where that was, and that was fun to visit that area. So, anything else, folks? Thanks. We will stay warm. It's getting cool here, guys. Winter is coming on. Any case, I wish all of you an excellent, wherever you are in the world, an excellent Thanksgiving that's coming up next week. Feel free to stay in touch. You're always welcome to go to any of my web pages, has a contact page if you want to send me questions or any comments or anything like that. And I look forward to talking with you again. And yes, thanks, Jules. It's learnrv.org. I have self-paced classes. Let me just try the free one out first and see if it's for you or not. Some people say it's really helpful to them. I found RV very useful, just learning to distinguish signal from noise, trusting your intuition, trusting your body, your gut feelings. That is all really valuable. We were just talking on the last RV Zoom group about intuition, and one person was saying that their father had been driving at night towards an area where the bridge had fallen down and he didn't know it, and it's dark. He would have gone into the river with his car, and some feeling turned him around and he didn't go over the bridge, went home. Intuition, it's real. So and it's fun to work with, and I think it's good to get to know yourself better, and of course do other things too, guys. I obviously, I like to play music and express that creativity. It's not from you, it's coming through you, and if you can tap into that, it just feels very rewarding, very satisfying to tap into that level of energy and information. I have heard Kawani Lapsaritas, Michigan, Sandman. I've heard him lecture. And I'm glad you brought that up, because he showed up. He was invited to the Open Minds, the International UFO Congress. I believe it was 2014, because I have a video of him from what used to be called International UFO Congress, which met for many years in Laughlin, Nevada. My first UFO conferences, going back to 99, I believe. The conferences started before that. That's when I started going. Eventually, they became part of the Open Minds UFO Congress and were outside of Scottsdale, Arizona, at Fountain Hills, Arizona, on a Native American reservation there. And that's where I saw Kawani present, I believe, in 2014 at the Fountain Hills conference. I believe now it's shifted to Phoenix the last time. It was the MUFON group there that ran it. And he was this is before I really got interested in Bigfoot. He was the one that talked about invisibility, which I now believe we have some basis for understanding how it happens, having talked to so many people who've seen this themselves in front of their own eyes. Just the creatures just vanish or become like this glowing predator-like effect. I talked to someone in Idaho recently. She and her husband had seen this. They walked up, it was still sort of around the tree, this glowing sort of energy field where the Sasquatch had been. So maybe he has these, I know people who have these Sasquatch friendships. I've talked to people who have this. They have these gifting relationships on their properties. They don't want to make this public. They like this kind of special relationship they have with Sasquatch. It's positive. There's a gift exchange. As you probably remember, I talked to someone from the Spokane tribe in Forks a couple of years ago at the Forks conference who said his grandfather had traded with Sasquatch as recently as 1913. I had to ask him, what did they trade? And it was a salmon for medicinal herbs. The Sasquatch would bring the medicinal herbs, and his father was a fisherman. So people have these relationships with them. I can't verify Kawani's relationship, friendship or not, but people say that I've talked to seem credible, say they have these relationships with them long term. So gifting relationships, and the Sasquatch like to bring, what they consider to be a gift. It could be like, mummified field mice braided in grass, or, crystals, or something beautiful. And people often, I don't think it's a good idea to leave them sweets too much. I mean, that's not really good for anyone, refined sugar. I mean, peanut butter seems okay in apples. Things, I wouldn't leave them cookies and stuff, even if they like it. I mean, we like that stuff too. It's not good for you. I would stick with the natural stuff for Sasquatch. Okay. Any case, okay. All right. Well, folks, thank you for being here tonight. And can you post links in the video description after? Yeah, I'll post some links later on. No problem. Last comment. Sasquatch seem to not want to teach us the woo, but they do. Yes, they do. They do some really interesting things around people. The more you read about this, the more you talk to people, some really interesting alchemical type stuff, which again leads me to think they've kind of mastered electrostatic charge just intuitively the way John Chang is. I mean, guys, one last thing when I think about Sasquatch and Bigfoot, maybe they're like nature's Qigong masters. Maybe they just, what we call Qi or Qigong or Tai Chi, maybe they just have learned how to manipulate that electrostatic field, in my view, in such a subtle way that they can create and disassociate matter. Some of them, at least, something like that. I'll just leave you with that. Yep, and Jewel says, pretty little flowers. Maybe you've received that, Jewel. Pretty little flowers on moss, on sticks and rocks. Yeah, beautiful things. But they're so good at living it, and then you don't see them doing it. People talk about having their trail cams out there, and it doesn't pick up something, or it just picks up a hand, a big hairy hand, like one frame. Yeah. One more thing. I know Les Stroud, if you've been watching his YouTube channel, he did the Survivor Man and Survivor Man Bigfoot. Remember, because he encountered Sasquatch or something like that, doing Survivor Man filming. So he's doing the question of Bigfoot. I think it's on Kickstarter right now. To have a whole another documentary series about Bigfoot, which would be a lot of fun because he was one of my introductions to the topic of, again, coming from someone who was an outdoors person but wasn't really into Bigfoot, but hearing the whooping sounds, having the trees fall down next to him and things like that got him interested, and he went out to all these areas and he had experiences like the mind speak that he couldn't explain. So in any case, yeah, one more here, Seth. Yes, I used to go to the Seth conferences somewhere, Winter Park, Colorado, when they had them. Yeah, right. Seth talked about this too. So it's how do we access it? I mean, it's fun to access these abilities, and it's challenging. It gives you a focus, and it's useful. The guy, by the way, in Nagasaki, who called himself Mr. Anderson, that was his American name. He said that he worked in the local hospital healing people, just like John Chang apparently did. I think I remember reading that in the book, in the Ross Dineos book, about working at local hospitals. So the people have used this in productive ways. It just hasn't been incorporated in our existing systems, but we'll get there, folks. I am sure. So in any case, thanks, folks. We will see you in next time. Take care for now, and bye-bye.